debate for the Legislative District 33, Seat A, between Miranda Marquit and, thank you, and Barbara Ehardt. We're glad to have you here. I'm Diane Jensen. I'm the second vice chair for the Bonneville County Republicans. And I've been working closely with Dan Barker, who's the vice chair for the Democrats, and he wasn't able to be here tonight, but I appreciate him and all his efforts too. I'd like to introduce our moderators. For the Democrat side, Jan Brown. She is their state committee woman. We're thankful to have her here. And then on the Republican side, Bryan Smith. He's our state committee man. So we're completely even tonight. And then Jolene Berger is our legislative district chair for Legislative District 33. She's going to be in charge of the time clock. And it's a little finicky, so be patient with us, sorry. She'll raise the red card when it's time, when your time's done. And we will have an invocation by our chairman, Nick Contos, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Gary Farron, one of our PCOs. And then I will explain the rest of the program.
Our dear God and Father in heaven, as we gather together today to debate topics of politics, we thank Thee. We thank Thee for the many blessings which we enjoy, for this land we have to live in, for the good community that we have in Bonneville County and the state of Idaho. We thank Thee for our constitutional system and for the opportunity that we have to gather together and talk about principles that are near and dear to our hearts. We ask you if thou please bless the speakers, the candidates tonight, that they will be able to express their views clearly, and that the audience will be able to understand their points of view. We ask if thou please bless all of us, that we will be able to understand the principles that make our community, our state, and our nation better day by day, that we may be able to grow and learn and be able to come to understandings and improve our communities. We ask you for these blessings in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Audience, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so I'll explain the rest of the program. We have collected questions respectively between our central committees and our constituents, and we've kind of compiled those questions. We'll probably, due to time constraints, we'll have about 6 questions per side. And the way it will go is Ms. Brown will ask a question of both candidates. They will have 1 minute each to respond to the question. Then they will each have 30 seconds for rebuttal. And then Ms. Brown can ask a follow-up question. They will each have 30 seconds for rebuttal for that. And then we will move on to the other side. And we ask that there will be no applause so that we can move through the questions quickly and be respectful of those who are speaking. And with that, I will turn the time over to Ms. Brown. Oh, and invite the candidates to come up. I'm sorry. We kind of need them. That's right. After the rebuttal, then each moderator will be allowed 1 follow-up question with 30-second follow-up answers.
So they're giving introductions.
Yes, we will begin with introductions. At the end of questions, they will have time for closing statements.
And are those timed?
And Ms. Marquit, you will be first.
Hello, my name is Miranda Marquit. I grew up here in Idaho Falls. I'm a graduate of Skyline High School. My parents and my grandparents instilled in me practical values and an interest in community involvement. As a result, you can often find me enjoying our great outdoors, as well as serving on local nonprofit boards that focus on early childhood education, hunger, and housing. Also, because I'm connected in the community as a parent whose son graduated from District 91 schools, as well as is currently attending the College of Eastern Idaho, I am well aware of the issues that we face here in District 33 and in Idaho at large. I am ready to tackle these challenges with common sense approaches rather than spending my time and taxpayer money on extremist policies that don't provide any sort of meaningful investment in our communities. Thank you.
Actually, whoops, hold on. Oops. No, that, just hold it down. Hello, hello. I don't necessarily,
Hello.
okay, I was gonna say, I don't necessarily need one. Full disclosure, before we actually start the time, just so you guys know what's going on, I do have my phone up here. It is specifically to see where I am on the time. Just want to make that clear. At least odd statements get out there. Okay. Anyway, thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate this opportunity. It's the most unique opportunity and the most unique way to have a debate. I think it's probably the more appropriate way to have a debate. Make no mistake that there is a huge dichotomy between the two of us. Voters will have a choice. It's not black and it's not gray. And what we have to look at is we have to look at where America has been. 2 years ago, we were thriving. We had 1.5% inflation. We had low food prices, low gas prices. We had a vision, and then all of a sudden, everything changed. Democrat policies have created chaos. It's created over 9% inflation. Our gas prices are incredibly high, and they're going to go higher after the election when we quit using our backup energy. What we need right now is to make sure that we understand when we look at the cities and the states that are thriving, they are run by Republicans. No question. I have been part of that here in Idaho, and I intend to keep doing the things that we've done to make Idaho great.
Time. First question goes to Ms. Marquit. It's about education. While Idaho has gradually raised its average teacher salaries since 2014, all Idahoans are concerned that starting and top pay are still too low to be competitive with neighboring states. There appears to be enough money to further increase teacher pay to attract and retain quality teachers in both urban and rural areas. What priority will you place on increasing teacher salaries, and in what other ways will you support our Idaho teachers?
So I definitely agree with increasing teacher salaries. The main thing that I'm most concerned about right now is the special session supposedly allocated $406 million per year toward education. Unfortunately, it is based on sales tax. So many of you might remember the last time the state legislature based our education on sales tax. They immediately yanked it back. So my biggest concern right now is that we get folks in the legislature who are committed to education and not committed to making big, grand gestures when they're forced to by the people of Idaho through the ballot initiative program. So that is my biggest issue, is that we do need to support education. We do need to do it with more than lip service, and we need to actually make sure that in January, that $406 million is in fact properly allocated to our teachers, to our paraprofessionals, and to our ongoing vocational and career programs, as well as our current educational system.
Time.
Okay,
Same
same
question.
question. I didn't know if you were going to repeat it again.
Would you like me to?
No. Fortunately for us, we have invested a ton of money into education. These last 2 years, especially this last year, something like 12.5% increase into education. Our teacher salaries increased dramatically, I think by another 12%. Administrative salaries increased again. We are putting the money and the investment that we need to into education. What we need now is we need to continue to get those results. It's not just about money. Unfortunately, throughout the entire United States, we're experiencing a teacher difficulty. Teachers are retiring and leaving the profession left and right. It's not just an Idaho problem. What we need to do is we need to recognize that there's more to this than what just meets the eye. A lot of the requirements that our teachers are forced to deal with now, such as the social emotional learning, they're asked to do things that they didn't go to school to do. Our teachers want to go and teach. They want to teach. They don't want to have to deal with all of these extra problems that we're putting on them and asking them to correct.
Follow up.
Well, I was just wondering if I can.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. Teachers should not be dealing with these issues. We should be funding an education system that includes a proper amount of mental health professionals, and we should be focusing on mental health in our communities at large, which is something that Idaho has not done. And it's very nice to say that we're increasing our education funding, when the reality of the situation is we're increasing it from what we cut it to past 2008. So it's nice that we're increasing it from what we've already cut it down back from. And the real question is, do you trust these people to continue with education?
You know what? That is not true. We've exceeded that. We're past that point. Right now, we're moving beyond. And this latest investment during the special session to education far exceeded what Reclaim Idaho was planning to do. We already exceeded that with the $260 million that we put during the session. We're investing in education because education matters. And I have supported almost all of those investments. Where we differ, time.
Well, maybe
I'll call it on myself.
Well, maybe my follow-up.
I was at 30 seconds already.
So you're mentioning the social aspects of all of this. Why, first, Ms. Marquit, do you think the idea of teaching critical race theory in Idaho public schools was so inflammatory last year, even though those claims did not move out?
I mean, it has a lot to do, once again, with lip service. We talk a big game about education, but we still don't know how those funds are going to be allocated. The nice thing about the Reclaim Idaho situation was that we knew exactly how those funds were going to be allocated. Right now, we have to trust people who have not done right by education for the last 10 years to allocate those funds. When it comes to critical race theory, it was a red herring. We know it's not being taught in Idaho schools. We know it's not an issue in Idaho schools. What we do know is that it's a great culture war issue designed to take our focus away.
That is a complete false narrative. Critical race theory is real. It's being taught, and teachers have admitted to it being taught. They've also admitted that they're going to teach it, even if we say we can't teach it. And you know what else they've said? They're going to call it something else. So for my opponent to sit up there and say that tells me she has no clue what's going on. She hasn't invested herself into what's being taught in our school system. We're being taught that some of our kids are the oppressors and then the oppressive. This is wrong. We need, time.
Do I get a rebuttal?
Make sure I got this right. All right. Okay. My first question goes to Ms. Ehardt. And because we've been talking about education, I'm going to ask you an education question. Ms. Ehardt, do you think that our government school system in Idaho is acceptable, or does it need improvement? And if it needs improvement, how would you improve it? And do you think money should follow the student?
Love that question. I 100% believe that we should fund the student, not the system. It's starting to happen in other states, and the results are going to be impressive. Our students deserve the money to follow them. When we fund a system, we allow the system to dictate what needs to be done as opposed to centering that education to the child. And if we're talking about ESAs, there's a misnomer there. We seem to think that if an ESA is adopted in Idaho, like it's been in other states, including Arizona, that somehow it's going to hurt public education and take money from that. Let me just tell you, with all of the people moving in, it's not going to hurt the public education as far as removing money. What it's going to actually do is help with some of the overcrowding. It's going to provide options. It's going to allow us to cater to the needs of that student. And what it's going to also do is create a standard whereby if there's questions about what some of the things the public schools are going to do, they're going to have to up the game. It's a fantastic thing to do. We should fund the student.
Time.
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and use quick time. How many of y'all are teachers, and how many of y'all, okay, and now how many of y'all are teaching critical race theory? Oh, right, it's not in our curriculum, that's right, because our state legislature, rather than asking teachers what kind of curriculum they should have, they are dictating curriculum to our schools and our school districts. How many of you teachers feel respected by our current state legislature? Yeah, that's what I thought. So anyway, what we need to do is we need to make sure that our state legislature is fulfilling the Idaho constitutional duty, which is to provide a uniform public education to our students. Rather than relying on sales tax and property taxes, we need to be funding it adequately out of our general fund. We need to be funding our teachers. We need to be funding our programs. We need to be funding our career. We need to be funding our higher ed. We need to be focused on actually providing that uniform public education dictated to us in our Idaho Constitution.
Well, I'll take that as we're not going to fund the student. We're going to fund the system. And that's a failing system. And you know what? It's time that we start getting our mind wrapped around the needs of funding the student. And all of those who care about the student, please indicate by remaining seated. Excellent. So with that in mind, let's start paying attention to the needs of the student. Oh, very good. We don't care over there. That's all right. But I'm going to focus my continued efforts on our kids. It's okay. I've got my right clock. Are we ready for my rebuttal? Are we ready for
Focusing on our system and focusing on providing that uniform education is funding our students. And quite frankly, our state legislature hasn't proved itself interested in doing so. And it's really easy to point to a failing system when the legislature has sabotaged it. When the legislature has made an effort to make it difficult for teachers to do their jobs. When the legislature isn't adequately funding career and vocational programs. When the legislature isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, yeah, it's easy to say it's a failing system.
Time.
Okay, this is where I get to ask my follow-up questions. And so what I'm going to do is, they're pretty close. I've got a follow-up question for Ms. Marquette and Ms. Ehardt. So let me start. I'm taking a look. It comes with Ms. Ehardt first, okay? So I'll just take the follow-up question is, you get 30 seconds to answer. Am I right about that? And then I have a follow-up question for you. Ms. Ehardt, I heard your answer. I'm still looking for a response to my question when I said, do you think that our government school system in Idaho is acceptable or needs improvement? If it does need improvement, how would you do it?
Well, what I thought I'd answered is that yes, we're going to improve it by adding ESA to fund our kids. Fund our kids, not the system. That's how I'm going to help improve it. That's what we've been working towards in many respects. And for my opponent to suggest that we haven't been out there working for teachers, good heavenly days. Almost every time I've been out there suggesting, every time they want to bring another requirement for our teachers to do, I fought against that. Let our teachers teach. We've got some incredibly knowledgeable teachers. Let them teach.
Ms. Marquette, you responded to my question about talking about CRT, but my question asked if you think that money should follow the student. I didn't hear a response. And I also asked if you think the school system in Idaho is acceptable or needs improvement. And if it needs improvement, how would you do it? I'm looking forward to your response.
Yeah, so I already said that the school system does need improvement. We need to get over the sabotage from the state legislature for the past 10 years. And we need to make sure that we are adequately funding programs, mental health, and teachers, and paraprofessionals, and everything that goes with a successful education system. And do I think that money should follow the students? Well, I think that money should definitely follow the students when we're talking about the formula that the Quality Education Act put forward, which assigns it to our public school districts. So we want to make sure that we are funding public education.
Thank you for the discussion. We'll shift gears a little bit to taxes. It's related. If elected, and this question is for Representative Ehardt. If elected, what will you do to give property tax relief to Idaho families? In answering, please address the idea of increasing and or indexing the homeowner's exemption.
Okay, first off, we seem to have a misunderstanding of where and who's in charge of property taxes. Let's make no mistake, the state legislature, we do not tax, we do not levy, and we do not collect property taxes. We have no say in it whatsoever. Your local entities do. It's not about the levy, it's about the budget increases. If you want to see your property taxes go down, then what you need to be able to do is you need to make sure that we're voting for those people and those policies that will drop those property taxes and quit raising the budget. Fact of the matter is, as we're talking about this, I don't think once that my opponent has said anything about our local entities. Just let them spend whatever they want to spend. We're right now facing a recession and an inflationary problem with all of us and our discretionary money. And what has the city done? They took 3%, they took growth, they took foregone, they raised impact fees, and they increased the fees. Okay, this is not a formula for lowering property taxes. Time.
I think it's fascinating that in our opening statement, we learned that Joe Biden is here on the ballot this year in Idaho, District 33, and now we're learning that our city council and our mayor are on this District 33 ballot. It's amazing. But anyway, it's disingenuous to pretend like the state legislature can't do anything about this property tax exemption when they're the ones who set the exemption level, and they're the ones who created this exemption problem in 2016. They passed a law that capped the exemption, and that is what we're dealing with right now, and that is what the question is about. We need to reverse this policy. We need to reverse this cap on the exemption that the state legislature put on, and they're the only ones who can remove it. So don't let them pass the buck and kick the can down the road. They made this exemption problem, and they're the ones that need to fix it. So yes, we need to raise that exemption. We should consider indexing it to inflation and property values, and we should make sure that we have something for those on fixed incomes to have a little bit more of an exemption, especially for our seniors who are getting railed right now.
Time.
Rebuttal?
This just tells me that we absolutely do not understand how property taxes work, because the exemption is going to do very little. It's all about the budgets. It's all about spending. What the state did do, though, is we did do with a couple of things we passed. We took the public defenders off the payroll, so that's going to help your property taxes at the county level. We ended the indigent care levy. That's going to help. The other thing we did is we gave our mayors and our city council the ability with the ARPA money to give that back to us as the taxpayers and be able to then have a decrease in our property taxes. Did they do it? No.
Time. Rebuttal?
What the state legislature did in 2016, no matter how much kicking the can they want to do, is put 70% of the burden on residential homeowners and reduce the burden on commercial to 30%. So, if you want to talk about all of these other things, the exemption makes a big deal. I'm glad that it doesn't matter to Representative Ehardt whether or not you guys get a good exemption on your property tax values in this time of rocketing rates. But if you want to see that exemption rise, then we need folks in the legislature who are ready to tackle this issue and not keep kicking it down the road.
Okay, as a follow-up question, it's my understanding of the rules that I can ask one question to both of you, not tailor follow-up questions. So my one question is, before Idaho drastically reduced corporate taxes, Idaho was known for having a balanced approach to levying its income, property, and sales taxes. How will you work towards restoring this balance? And this is a question to Representative Ehardt.
Well, I like what we've already been doing. And with the small tools that we have in our toolbox, we've been working it well. Keep in mind, when it comes to the commercial and the homeowners, right now, one of the reasons that the homeowner is basically rising is because that's what's in demand. It's not fair when the commercial and the ag isn't in demand and it's not selling like the homes are, that we're going to burden them with the same burden that is happening with the homeowners. And if you want an exemption, time.
We should go back to separating out our corporate tax rate from our personal tax rate. And it will affect our major C corporations, so those major companies. Sure, we should go ahead and separate that out and have a separate tax bracket for them. So the good news is that most of our small businesses are LLCs and S Corps, which is a different type of structure, so they would not be impacted. So most of us small business owners, like myself, I am a small business owner, most of us small business owners would not be impacted by separating out those tax brackets, but we definitely need to go back to where we were.
Thank you.
Okay, here goes. I've got another question. Jen just asked a great question about property taxes. It was one I had prepared, so thank you for asking that. I'm going to go back and ask an education question to both candidates. Recently, we've seen in the news a lot of discussion about drag queens and drag queen events in Idaho. It's occupied a lot of airspace in Boise and also recently in Pocatello. Recently, Ms. Marquette, you tweeted, quote, "Damn straight, drag queens in schools, they're kind, empathetic people who value our freedom," unquote. Do the candidates support drag queens in schools, and are drag queens in schools really the kind of example that your constituents value?
Who's first?
I would much rather have a qualified drag queen teaching in school than book burners in my library, in my legislature, but here we are. So the reality of the situation is they're making it a big deal. They're making these kinds of things a big deal by using inappropriate language. According to RAIN, Zero Abuse Project, and research from the Virginia Commonwealth University, exposure to drag queens as well as exposure to LGBTQIA folks is not the same thing as grooming. In fact, numerous studies indicate that drag queens are among the least likely to be involved in grooming or in sexual abuse. Just look at the headlines that we have seen in the last 2 months. Using such language as part of a moral panic actually prevents the identification of grooming and does nothing to actually protect children. Instead, it whips up a frenzy over a non-existent problem while ignoring the true issues that we've seen in the headlines. Rather than trying to protect actual abusers like Von Englerberg, we should be actually trying to protect children.
Time.
Do you know how many sexual predators they have found that are drag queens? It is an enormous amount. Shame on those of you who would support this kind of activity with our children. This is
Numbers.
Yep, please.
This is not appropriate for the Idaho way. As a matter of fact, this is the kind of thing when it comes to pornography, when it comes to subjecting our children to the degrading objectivity that the drag queen offers, and then to bring the kids up there and allow them to perform too, because that's how they're going to express themselves, as though they have no other means of doing so, that they can't join a bike team, they can't play in the dirt. This is the only way to be able to express their authentic self. This is not the Idaho way. I absolutely don't support it, and I will do everything I can to fight against exposing our children to this.
Actual research does show that drag queens are not number one in terms of actual sexual abuse. If you look at the actual research, which I in fact cited, I know it's hard. At any rate, when you're looking at this, I think it's very interesting because in 2020, there was a bill called HB 455. This bill was designed to get rid of mandatory reporting for sexual abuse of children. Guess who voted for this bill? That's right. So even though this got rid of penalties for failure to report sexual abuse, we're pretending like drag queens are the problem, but the problem is in our legislature.
People, we have a standard. We used to have a standard here, actually throughout America, and we slowly keep chipping away at it until at some point we become insensitized to all of this. It's just common thing. And yes, we do believe, and we have seen proof, that this is a grooming opportunity, and it desensitizes all of us to those things that would continue to degrade our society, especially when we expose our children to it. I am not for that, and I will not support it.
As a follow-up question to the candidates, what would be the youngest grade in school that you would approve drag queens interacting with children?
Wow, I mean, drag queen story hour is a thing at the library, and quite frankly, if you actually were aware of any of these issues, you would know that drag is neither inherently sexual nor inherently LGBTQIA. So the reality of the situation is there are actual people who do harm, and we have people who actually vote for legislation that gets rid of mandatory reporting for sexual abusers, but we're wasting our time on fake definitions.
I 100% do not support any of that for our kids. Our kids should not be exposed to it, and I don't think I need to go beyond that.
Okay, let's do something less controversial like reproductive rights. In view of the recent Dobbs decision by the U.S. Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, where do you stand on Idaho's current abortion law? In answering, please explain your view on exceptions for rape or incest and your overall position regarding a woman's reproductive rights. And Ms. Marquit, it's for you to answer
Actually, I think
first.
Is it me first? Okay, because I thought I answered the last one. Yeah, so personally, what I think is that we need to take a look at how much government intervention we want in our lives. So when you have an intimate decision to make, do you want the government getting involved? Do you want to have to call a lawyer? Or do you want to make this intimate decision between you, your healthcare provider, and your God or spiritual provider, right? So personally, I don't think the government needs to be hugely involved in this. We are well aware of what the research shows, and the research shows that, whether or not you agree with a woman's absolute right to bodily autonomy, the research shows that if you actually want a policy of reducing abortions, you need comprehensive sex ed and access to affordable birth control. Abortion bans don't actually reduce abortions. We saw it in Ireland, we saw it in Romania, and there is 50 years worth of research that backs that up. So what I say is if you actually want to ban abortion, if you want to reduce abortions, if you want to get rid of them, do something that's policy-oriented for education and birth control.
Well, I absolutely am a pro-lifer. I believe in children, and I also believe that Idaho has a huge opportunity to lead out in both supporting the unborn child and also doing a better job now of making it possible for children to possibly be adopted without such a high cost. As far as I'm concerned, we have to remember, this is not a matter of bodily autonomy. This is a matter of whose body. And once that child is conceived, we have two bodies. And that's the difference in where we stand. We have two bodies, and those two bodies, we are looking to protect the life of that unborn child. I sincerely believe in that and will continue to do everything I can to support that. I will also, I believe you asked, where do we stand? We might have to follow this back up because I would like to address in 30 seconds about the rape and incest.
Okay. You have 30 seconds.
So it's really great to know that as far as bodily autonomy goes and other bodies being involved, you would totally support forced blood donation because that would save somebody else's body and somebody else's life. Forced bone marrow transplant, forced organ donation. After all, a corpse gets to decide whether or not its organs can save 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 people's lives. So sure, yes, of course, let's get that national registry going to make sure that those intimate decisions that you make about whose body you're going to save and whose child you're going to help can be made.
That is such a false logical assumption. I can't even believe you brought it up. Okay, let's get to the heart of the matter. We're talking about the unborn child. It is a child that a parent has the responsibility. You look at your own children, you look at a baby. A parent can't just do whatever they want to that child. They have requirements. They need to take care of that child. And we believe we need to take care of that child before it comes out of the womb also. Real quick, I do believe in protecting those who have been raped in incest, actually. I do believe, sorry, I know it's time, but I do believe in protecting that life of mother.
Well, a follow-up question then. Many are taking it to the next level, saying that there will be regulation of women's birth control measures and use of other contraceptives that are often used for women entering menopause, etc. So what is your position regarding further regulation of women's health?
Well, once again, like I said, these are intimate decisions that you should be making with your healthcare provider and not with your government or your state legislature. So I don't think that we should be restricting birth control in that way. And to pretend like women's bodily autonomy stops just because she's carrying something is ridiculous. Because the bottom line is we grant bodily autonomy to everybody except women. And that's just not right.
So first, let me just finish clarifying that I stand with the legislation that we have passed at the legislative body already, which provides for exceptions with rape and incest. But let's remember the rape and incest account for less than 1% of those cases of which we're talking. Abortion has become a convenient means of getting rid of the child. You have the opportunity to make those decisions before you engage in sexual acts, okay? And once you have a responsibility to that child.
Done.
I already hit time, but that's okay.
I'm gonna say it every time, I know you're aware of it.
Okay.
I'll say it anyway.
This question is for Ms. Ehardt, and it's kind of a, Jen did another good job taking my abortion question, good job. But I want to follow up with something that deals with abortion and reproductive rights. Now that we have the Dobbs decision, that the state of Idaho already has a trigger law that's been pulled, and assuming that abortions remain illegal in the state of Idaho, would the candidates support expanding health and welfare funding for pregnancy crisis centers to avoid abortions? And would you also support expanding adoption rights, including tax credits, to help young women or other women who are facing a pregnancy deal with the issue?
I absolutely would. Unfortunately, when the LDS Church and the Catholic Church got out of the adoption business, the adoption prices skyrocketed. And if we're going to ask moms or women to carry the baby, and if they don't want to keep it, we need to provide options. And you know what? We have so many people in Idaho, I've spoken with them, that want children and they can't afford it. The last person that works for me had to pay $40,000. They're not done with the child they just adopted. $40,000 to get a child. That's unreal. It's unacceptable. So we do need to do something about that. The other thing is, James Revenge, man, they are on a roll, and they did some damage in Pocatello to the health center and clinic down there. This has got to stop. They're just there to help provide options for women who want to keep the children. Yes, we need to support these things. If we value life, then I want to show that I value life, and I do value life.
Time.
So yeah, if we're going to go ahead and use funding to help fund pregnancy crisis centers, which actually have been shown through the research to provide misinformation as well as false information, then yeah, at least the very least we can do is make sure that we're helping Planned Parenthood, who on top of providing any number of resources for cancer screening, for birth control access, for other reproductive care access, would actually be more useful and helpful. When you look at the studies, one thing that you know is that most abortions take place in the first trimester. We're not talking about abortions later, and we know that most people who have abortions are doing so in heartbreaking situations where they most likely wanted to have the child. When you look at the research from the Kaiser Family Foundation and from other respected institutions, including universities, you would know this. So we should be expanding our funding for affordable housing, for childcare, for family leave, for mental health services, and for adoption. All of these things would actually support a culture of life.
When it comes to the topic of abortion, we have to understand that, again, we're talking about saving lives. And if Planned Parenthood did more than just abortion and really focused on all these other things, we wouldn't have them closing up in all of these states that have now adopted the new policy once Roe Wade had been abolished. And we've got Planned Parenthood leaving states. If they're all about all of these other cares, stay there and do it. Do your job. But they're leaving because their job is different.
Citation needed. As always, citation needed. At any rate, Planned Parenthood is running into problems because they're being aggressively attacked, which is a problem. But I'm not here to talk about Planned Parenthood. I'm here to talk about things that actually support life and reduce abortions. If you truly want to reduce abortions, you have comprehensive sex ed, you have access to affordable birth control, you have family leave policies, you have great health insurance, you have affordable housing. These things are investments in the community and true investments in a culture of life, not just telling you have to give birth.
Time.
I just want to make sure that the candidates are absolutely clear on this issue. Would you please state your position as to what limits, if any, you would place on abortion?
Well, again, in trying to be very clear, I do not support abortion. However, in the case of rape or incest, and you have a child there who may be asked to carry a child and continue to impact their lives, I think that is and should be the family decision. Okay, I also very much support, and just on a side note, the whole Bonneville County Central Committee had passed a resolution supporting the same thing, that we do support the life of the mother.
I believe that this is a decision that you make with your healthcare provider and your God. I don't see why we need to have the government muddling about in this decision. As we know, most people who take this decision do so because of health reasons, because of heart-rending decisions that they have to make. And rather than forcing them to carry a septic fetus till whenever and ruining their chance of having children in the future, we should be letting medical people help them make the right decisions for them.
Time.
Thank you. Since we're on healthcare, let's keep going. Idaho needed to pass an initiative in order to expand Medicaid, yet there are those who would like to restrict access or reduce federal insurance programs. Please describe your views on existing government-supported health insurance programs and ideas like Medicare for All.
Is it mine? I think it's me.
And that's
It's Ehardt.
representative.
Okay. Yeah, I think I have the pattern down. Okay, well, let's be clear about this. When Medicaid expansion was being pushed by Reclaim Idaho, who, by the way, gets funded through George Soros, but as they were pushing that initiative, one of the things that I kept talking about was their numbers were way off. That the number of people that would actually access that care would be double, and the cost would be more than double. Guess who was right? Me. Here's the problem, because now we have it, and by the way, I didn't vote against it. We did try to put some sideboards on it so that able-bodied people could not just receive help without doing something. Here's the problem, though. The people for whom Medicaid was originally intended are finding that they are not able to get the same services that they originally needed. And that's the problem. As a matter of fact, we have something coming up that I know they want to talk about it locally with our time.
Yeah, 2 seconds. What?
No, I didn't.
Citation needed, as always, citation needed. So anyway, Medicaid expansion has been great. I know that there are people in this very room who now have access to affordable health care that they did not have access before. And yes, thank you. And thanks to Reclaim Idaho, who is not funded by George Soros. Again, citation needed. It's really fun that we like to, do all these boogeyman out here rather than actually looking at issues. But Medicaid expansion was hugely helpful in getting people affordable access to healthcare. And I honestly think we should be going back to the idea of a public option, where you do have the option to buy into Medicare, which is in fact one of the best run programs that we have, and is also one of those with one of the lowest incidences of fraud, which you can actually look up through studies. So that is something that we should be doing, is looking into that. And as far as Idaho goes, and Idaho specifically, Idaho has some of the most restrictive Medicaid requirements, at least they did prior to the expansion. And here we are, these legislators are happy to get their PPP loans forgiven, but not give you money for your health care.
Rebuttal?
Thank you. You know what? You want a citation? Our legislative book on spending. Miranda, it's there. So I'm just telling you that the numbers are double, those on the programs double, and it's taken away from those who really need it. So if you want to continue down that, right now, Medicaid care just surpassed our education spending. And it went up at a trajectory. As a matter of fact, I was looking to see if I have that. You can't see my little site here, but to be able to show you at the rate that Medicaid has expanded.
Time.
Actually, I think it's great. If it's double than what it was, that just tells me that Idaho was severely underfunding it in the past. So it's good that we actually have this expanding. And since we've gone ahead and we're touting this amazing windfall of money. I'm not sure why we can't, increase our education funding and also help the folks who need it the most. People need access to affordable health care. It's just basic. It helps reduce our costs overall, including for preventative medicine. And so having access to more Medicaid is not a bad thing.
Time.
Follow-up question, this is from one of our Democrats. What are your views on legalizing marijuana, at least for medical purposes, but also recreational?
I'm going to say this first. What people need when it comes to their money is they need their money. The first institution that should be funded is the family. All other institutions are second, and right now the family's suffering. I do not support the legalization of marijuana.
30 seconds.
Yeah. You're done.
Already?
So one of the things that the Centers for Disease Control points out is that alcohol actually has a higher death rate and more negative health benefits than marijuana. So I am certainly in favor of looking into that. In fact, we have an opioid crisis right here in Idaho Falls. And one of our fine service members, our disabled veterans over here, has supported me in my quest to say, yes, we should be considering marijuana legalization. So thank you for your service.
I'm just going to take a minute to remind everybody that we should not have any applause. That was agreed upon by both candidates. No applause, no outbursts, please. Thank you.
Okay, this next question is for, I've got my chart right, Ms. Marquit. Okay. One of the things we've got here in this room is a bunch of Democrats and Republicans, and sometimes it's hard for us to agree on things. But one thing I think we all can agree on is there's a lot of division in our country and in our state and even in our community. In fact, we hear a lot about an ongoing culture war. Is there a real culture war? And if so, what is it? Or if it's just made up, who made it up and why?
Well, I think it's, unfortunately, right-wing extremists have been driving the narrative of culture war, misusing words like grooming, pretending like critical race theory is a thing, and sending people to school board meetings to intimidate. We see the evidence of it up in northern Idaho, where people receive death threats on the regular just for doing their job as a librarian. So, yeah, we do have a culture war going, but the real issue is, are we going to let a very vocal minority run our state, or are we going to take back our state from this vocal minority that has outsized influence in our state legislature? Our state legislature is outsized and influenced by these vocal minority voices. The Idaho Freedom Foundation is an extremist organization that has given my opponent an 88% approval rating. And it is time for us to take back the legislature from these extremists.
Time.
Boy, let's not go to the boogeyman theory. So here we are looking at what has happened to America in this culture war. This culture war is looking at things like creating chop zones, not enforcing the law, making it so that people are scared to go out, allowing lawlessness and mass looting, not going after or penalizing anyone who engages in that sort of behavior, and instead going after people who are trying to stand up for the American values. Now, for us to keep that from entering here in Idaho, we have to keep standing strong on those American principles that helped to set us up in the first place. And that's what I am. Right now, we have a constitutional republic. We have a certain way that we do things. Within that constitutional republic, okay, we have laws, we have expectations, we have religion, and we have morality. And these all play in to how we're supposed to conduct our business. And yes, it does. And then when we don't allow that to take part.
Time.
So some people might think it's a boogeyman when armed people show up at the Bonneville County Library and threaten librarians. I think that's a very real issue. So those kinds of threats, those actual threats, are not boogeymen. Okay? Pretending like a drag show is going to destroy the morality of everybody around you, that's a moral panic. And there have been many things written about moral panics and how those are the boogeyman. So let's get that straight. Showing up armed to your school board meeting is not a boogeyman.
Miranda, and some things just go over our head over here. Of course, we were talking about the Idaho Freedom Foundation, wanting to point out these boogeyman connections. People, those of you who realize that I served on the Idaho Falls City Council before I ever went up to Boise to participate as a legislator. What was it that we talked about when I was on this Idaho Falls City Council? Oftentimes I was that 1-5 vote. I was too conservative. I was the one, not once did I support the budget and increase your taxes. Do you think I just went up to Boise and just changed? Okay, I am my own person. I am conservative. I believe in American values. That's how I vote. No boogeyman.
As a follow-up to both candidates, you both said that you believe there is a culture war taking place. My question is, if elected, what will you do to call a ceasefire to this culture war that both of you say exists?
Honestly, for me, it's focus on actual issues that matter to Idahoans. Idahoans care about education, they care about affordable housing, they care about jobs, they care about making sure that they can pay their property taxes now that the legislature got rid of the exemption. That's what I want to focus on. I'm tired of having these weird debates about hashtag rumoring everybody who disagrees with you. What I am about is actually addressing real issues rather than grandstanding in the legislature so we have another extended session.
Well, first off, you have to be able to work with everyone. I have a track record of passing legislation and working with legislation where I do reach across the aisle and work with others. Representative John McCrosty and I were able to bring forward campus free speech. It got hung up, unfortunately, in the Senate on the 14th order on a technicality, but I do plan to bring that back. I do plan to use Representative McCrosty, even though he's not running again, to help me bring that forward. So it's a matter of finding those commonalities and working together through that.
Time.
Well, then let's talk about constituency service and communication. When we put out the request for questions, I found we have Democrats who've never received any acknowledgement of their emails when they share their views on legislation with their representatives. If you win, this is for Miranda.
Oh.
In what ways will you build the voters' trust that their opinions matter?
Well, first of all, I don't block anybody on social media. I do my best not to call people who are talking to me silly, so I do those things. But I'm also interested in actually meeting people. So I have been having events all around the district for this last month and will continue to do so into October. There are some coming up. They're public. They're open to the public. Anybody's welcome to come up and talk to me during these events. When elected, I will do my best to put out a regular newsletter as well as hold regular town halls during the session. And I will be happy to take open live questions during these town halls. Unfortunately, we couldn't agree on that for this particular forum, but I am perfectly happy to take live open questions. And in fact, I will be visiting with Stand Up Idaho in October, even though we know that there's not a lot that we may not agree on a lot of things, but I am still willing to go and listen to them and speak with them. So these are all things I'm willing to do.
Well, as Miranda knows, I have been meeting with people, all people, since I served on the city council. I'm willing to meet with anyone, and usually over lunch, and usually with groups. And even Miranda had admitted some years ago that I was the only one that she felt she could really talk to, because that's what I do. And I will continue to do that. I'll continue to have my own forums and communicate with my people. I'm quite sure what you mean as far as the Democrats aren't receiving information back. When I get emails and I'm able to respond, I have no idea if they're a Democrat or Republican. So, I'm not quite sure what that means. But my constituents, now, sometimes when we get those 1,000 emails a day, yeah, you're not going to be getting something back. I can't even respond to half of that. But I'm a responder, so I'll continue to do that.
Time.
I'm
Got 7 seconds left.
30-second rebuttal?
Do we need rebuttals on this one?
maybe not. Anyway, I'm
I'll
good.
do a follow-up question then, save some time.
You don't want to say add another question, like.
So in general, what is a legislator's responsibility in maintaining their relationship with your constituents, your voters, regardless of their party affiliation? I'd like you to expand on it, as you were talking about a ceasefire.
I mean, honestly, I think trying to make yourself available when you can, as Representative Ehardt said, you may not be able to answer every single email. As somebody who's a business person and active on the internet, I can't always respond to all of my emails, but I think it's important to make it your best shot. I think it's important not to block people on social media, and I think it's important not to denigrate our constituents' intelligence while we're on social media as well.
Time.
Well, that's an interesting throwback. I'm not quite sure what you mean by blocking. And as far as when I use that comment silly, it's after we've gone back and forth, trying to have a civil conversation, and the person just makes an absurd comment going to absurd angles. And what else can you say? So you're not rude, silly. And I'll probably continue to do that because I think it most effectively emphasizes that, we're at an impasse now. But I will continue to interact with my constituents and the rest of the state of Idaho because that's who we represent. I want to keep Idaho strong.
Time.
Thank you.
My question is for Ms. Ehardt. I was lucky enough to raise 5 children. I used to tell them, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Because if you see who you associate with and who you admire, it says a lot about you and how you behave. So given that, I'd like you to name 3 state legislators you feel most closely aligned with your values and explain why.
Well, that would have to be Dan DeMornott, Brent Crane, who is our chair of the State Affairs Committee, and another one might be someone such as Sage Dixon. Why is that important to me? Because there are 3 representatives with whom I have great conversations. We're able to go into deep conversations about what's the best for Idaho. Granted, we do tend to align with our thinking. And these are some of the people, when you look at my voting record, you'll see that my voting record most closely matches these 3 people. If I could take it a step farther, though, and it wasn't just in the state of Idaho, I would have to say that I particularly enjoy watching and following Governor Ron DeSantis. What he is doing to promote freedom has been absolutely amazing. And that is how we're keeping states like Florida and other Republican states free.
Time.
Do you want me to answer the same question?
Yeah.
So I would have to say that some of the people that I most identify with in the state legislature are people like Colin Nash, who has a great grasp on good policy and who also makes it a point to fight on behalf of marginalized communities. I also really enjoy watching Ilana Rebell as she makes good, cogent arguments on various subjects. And I also really like the fact that Steve Birch is somebody who reaches out to his constituents, tries to knock on every door. I'm not quite the door knocker that Steve Birch is, but we can all aspire to that someday. I like that he is in touch with his community. For me, being able to be in touch with your community is what's most important because you understand what's going on, you understand the challenges. And so the people that I associate with on these various boards that I'm a part of are very important to me as well because they have an understanding of what's going on for real people on the ground. And I am proud that maybe not everybody I associate with is famous.
Should I? Okay, 30 seconds. 30 seconds follow up on that. I would have to say that the other thing that I have done also to be able to have that continued conversation with my legislative colleagues is last year I was able to bring the Prayer Caucus, which is a natural caucus that deals with religious and moral issues. Everyone is invited. And I think that's another unifying way where we can more closely find out those things that we have in common one with another and to make sure that we do so as we continue to invite the Lord into our discussions, just like we do every time we open the
Time.
session.
I mean, I really don't have a lot else to add other than I'm just very glad that I have the opportunities that I do to be in the community, be part of civic organizations, be part of service organizations, and work in concert with people who might potentially be my constituents, because it's a way for me to be with them every day and be with them in the community and hear their concerns. And so I think those are the folks that are the most important people that we should be talking to.
As a follow-up question, in the past, both Republicans and Democrats in the legislature have aligned with each other in voting to repeal the grocery sales tax. Is that something either of you candidates would be willing to do?
I think it's me, right? Okay. As I've stated before, that if you bring me a clean grocery tax, one that is a straight repeal of the grocery tax and does not have other attachments such as keeping cities and counties whole and keeping the grocery tax credit in there, then that's something that I'm willing to do. So a straight grocery tax repeal is something that I will support. And I believe that my colleagues will support that. You may think, well, why didn't you support it? It's about the process.
Time.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we need to be promoting policies that actually support people and families rather than offering another tax cut to the top 1%. Yeah, we need to be going through our entire tax policy. We need to be figuring out our sales tax exemptions, which powerful companies get those, and we also need to be taking a look at the grocery tax. So I'd be definitely in agreement with repealing the grocery sales tax.
Thank you. Since we're talking about how to help struggling families, let's talk about housing. Within the last year, Idaho had the highest increase in home appreciation compared to salaries, to wages. It's to the point where almost half of our families in Idaho Falls cannot afford the house they're living in. So if you were to be elected, what remedies to this challenge would you propose? And that's
Ehardt.
Ehardt.
Okay. Well, I think I've been pretty clear on this because, again, we have a misunderstanding of how this works. And we can talk about increasing the homeowner's exemption. That's not going to keep you in your home. As a matter of fact, for our seniors that are struggling to stay in their homes, please understand that you've already received your homeowner's exemption, assuming you have a home in the lower threshold. Okay? It's the homeowner's exemption when you get to those with the $300,000 home and all that exemption applies to. Most people think that it's just an automatic increase. It's not. So we're not helping by having a larger homeowner's exemption those who already received it. We really want to help people. We need to quit spending, especially right now in a recession when we have inflation. And I'm telling you what, as soon as the elections are over, you're going to see gas prices skyrocket because the administration is no longer going to be able to keep using from the reserves. So we better start doing something to help our families and quit spending.
So here in Idaho Falls, we are pioneering interesting solutions right here with Peterson Place. And I am very proud to be part of the board that is bringing this affordable housing initiative to Idaho Falls. So I'm already working on something like that. And this is a model that might be adopted other places. The other thing we need to look at is several years ago, the state legislature created an account meant for affordable housing and easing affordable housing. Guess what the state legislature then did not do? Fund it. So we actually need to be funding this account. So we have these massive surpluses, and those massive surpluses mean we are underinvesting in our communities, we are underinvesting in our families, we are underinvesting in our people. And we need to start investing in our people and our communities. So yes, the homeowner's exemption isn't a magic solution. It is part of what we can do. We can fix that. We can index it. And we can provide things like they do in other states to our seniors where they get extra help.
Time.
Fact of the matter is, when it comes to all of this, that money of which my opponent is speaking, that's our money. We're being taxed too much. And right now when we're struggling, we need it. And yet all my opponent wants to do is take our money, take your money, and keep spending it. And one of the reasons Idaho is thriving, unlike some of the other states, is because we have policies that are attracting businesses and people here. Now, granted, me having been born and raised here, I'm not sure what I think about everybody coming here, but I want you to have your money.
So yeah, Idaho does have these huge surpluses, and we do. We need to, rather than doing a flat tax, which was just passed, that actually cuts into what people in the lower tax brackets actually need for food and housing, we need to expand. We need to have broader tax brackets, and we need to make sure that, once again, yeah, it's our money, and we should be investing in our communities. When Idahoans list their priorities, they list education, they list housing, they list infrastructure, they list economy, they list jobs.
I'd like to do a follow-up, but I really wanted to get at is workforce housing. New young people who want to buy their first home are having great difficulty getting housing. The short-term rental phenomenon is restricting businesses' ability to have employees find decent housing, because, especially in resort areas. So please comment on how you can address workforce housing needs.
Well, the fact of the matter is, as we talk about the proper role of government, that's right where I think businesses should be collaborating together to help solve that. I don't think it's the government's role to come in and provide housing, not that you're suggesting that. Our role is to do the best we can to make sure housing can be provided by decreasing the property taxes and make it so that those who are building will want to build because they're not being priced out of the ability to build, and make it so that others can come here.
So once again, like I said, a model like Peterson Place is using is probably something that would benefit our workforce housing folks who need access to that housing. You specifically mentioned short-term rentals. So one of the things that can be done is limit the number of Airbnbs you can have in certain zoned areas. So for instance, it's possible to say, okay, yes, you can have 2 or 3 Airbnbs, but do you really need to have 5 or 6? And so really kind of take a look at that and look at some of these practical solutions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is my last question. And it is to Ms. Mark. Your opponent introduced and actually this is a question I just want to make sure that understands. It came from one of our key precinct committee officers. Your opponent, Ms. Marquit, introduced a bill banning biological males from women's sports. Under that bill, people with different chromosomes would compete separately regardless of what gender they identify with. The question is, how many genders are there and how do you actually define a woman?
Oh, this is so cute. We're using Matt Walsh. Isn't that fun? So the reality of the situation is I really don't know how many genders there are. I really don't care how many genders there are. What I care about is that we are focusing on issues that matter to Idahoans. Most Idahoans are interested in education, infrastructure, housing, economy, and jobs, and that's some weird, bad policy solution to problems that don't actually exist. The bottom line is Representative Ehardt has gone around the country promoting bills similar to hers. It's not even in effect here in Idaho because our state Supreme Court deemed it unconstitutional. In states like Utah, school districts are actually reporting that it's being used by parents to harass cisgender children who are doing well in sports. It's not even doing its intended purpose. So even though these bills sound fun and sound like they're affirming and sound...
Well, let me just clarify one thing. The Idaho Supreme Court hasn't weighed in on this. It's not their role. It went from the federal district court to Ninth Circuit and back to the federal, is headed back to the Ninth Circuit. And we'll go from there. Just to clarify. Right now, when we talk about gender, as she said, there seems to be no limit. Talk about chaos and confusion. So let me instead take it to this. Let me address sex, okay? How many sexes are there? There are 2 sexes, and we need to be very definitive in the fact that we teach this. What defines a sex besides your typical XX and XY? Sex has a function. Either it's about the sperm or the ova. If we don't have that involved in the sexual function, you have to either show that there's another unbeknownst sexual function that's out there, or we have two sexual functions. As far as gender is concerned, yeah, I think we have to stop with this nonsense. It's very confusing to everyone.
Time.
It's not that confusing. My 20-year-old son understands things like this. Everybody who I know who's in high school and younger actually understands that, you know what? You can talk to people and treat people with dignity no matter how they identify. And it is okay to respect people no matter how they identify. And it's really not that confusing at all. And P.S., there are more than two sexes. We forgot about intersex, and we forgot about a couple others. So biologically speaking, it's not just two. We have a science teacher over here who can help you out if you need it.
Actually, that's false. Even the intersex condition has a sex and a sexual function that can be determined. There are two sexes. As far as the ability to speak and treat each other in a very respectful manner, that goes without saying. But when we're allowing kids to be furry fandoms and all these other things that we're accommodating, it's getting in the way of our education. And when we put our teachers in a situation where they might have called somebody by the wrong pronoun, and now they're worried because they're worried what's going to affect them, how it's going to affect their job when they get that call from the principal, and these things are happening, this is wrong.
Follow-up question. There was, within the last year, a case in Texas where one of the parents was able to get a court order changing their minor child's sexual, I don't know what the word would be, we'll just say identifications. Would either of you support or oppose a bill in Idaho that prevented parents from doing that to minors?
From my understanding is that in Idaho, we allow parents to do whatever they want to their children. Isn't that what we do here in Idaho, whether it's letting them die of a treatable medical condition or whatever else it might be? I thought that here in Idaho, we believe that parents have the ultimate right. So I'm not sure why would we restrict that if they're providing affirming care. And let's be clear, the American Academy of Pediatrics does support affirming care for children.
I absolutely do not support children being put in a situation that they are too young to understand, that we're finding out that we're experimenting on our children. We're putting them in situations that now they're turning back around, detransitioning. This is actually child abuse. I support an adult to decide that they want to do whatever they think they need to do for that adult. I absolutely do support that. But our kids, no, not for our kids. We need to do the things to protect our kids, and we find out that our kids usually will grow out of some of this confusion. Protect our kids.
So we have time for 10, should we try some additional questions? I have a few backups.
Sure. One more piece.
Okay. So this is Ms. Marquardt. Given the lack of evidence of significant voter fraud in 2020, what is your opinion of politicians who continue to deny the validity of the presidential election outcome and even supported the January 6th attack on the Capitol?
I find it extremely frustrating that we have people who, due to lack of voter fraud, are using that now as an excuse to limit our access to the ballot box. I find it frustrating that we have politicians who pretend like we have this problem, and I'm very frustrated that there are politicians who do not condemn the January 6th assault on the Capitol, and it's also very frustrating to have politicians that likewise here in Idaho will not condemn those who intimidate our librarians, intimidate our school board members, and show up in a manner that is uncivil. It's very frustrating to me that I am expected to sit here and witness the Capitol riots on January 6th and pretend like it's not a problem and that we're supposed to speak soft words. But the real incivility is those attacks on our institutions and our attacks on our officials.
Time.
Well, let's do away with the First Amendment. Let's do away with that freedom of speech and everything else that goes with it, according to my opponent. But I'll tell you what, it is our responsibility. We are the government. We are that check and balance on the government. And when it comes to this insurrection, say what you want, but it's kind of hard to have an insurrection with brooms and I don't know, hats, whatever else they had. It's also kind of hard then to sit through these supposed hearings and only have one side, not even have the other side. What's American about that? We're talking about a third world kangaroo court. If that's what you want, we are definitely on opposite sides of the issue. You know, what we need to do is dig down in with a real investigation to find out what really happened and not suppress the voices of others. When it comes to election integrity, we have to remember, take Europe, for example. Europe and all but one of the countries, I believe just one of them, they require government-issued ID in order to vote. Other countries take voting more seriously than we do. It's something we should be protecting. Election integrity matters to a constitutional republic.
Time.
We already have protections for voting. We already have what we need for election security. We have found no cases of fraud, well, except for in cases of fraud where GOP officials in other states were committing fraud. Those are the cases of fraud we have found. But in investigation after investigation and lawsuit after lawsuit, we do not have a voter fraud problem. But they are using it as a convenient excuse to limit our access to the ballot box, and we should not stand for that. Voting is our right.
I have no idea what you're talking about, limiting access. The only limitation is improving that you're alive and that you're an American and that you vote once. What's limiting about that? That's as it should be. Not everybody gets to vote. That is a privilege. If you're not an American citizen, you shouldn't be voting. If you're dead, you shouldn't be voting. If you moved, you shouldn't be voting. It's really quite as simple as that. And why we would want to dispute that is actually beyond me. Let's just ensure our election is fair.
Follow-up question. It's a simple one. Ms. Marquit, would you accept the election outcome of this election?
Yeah, I mean, we already have what we need in place to ensure that people are alive and live where they're supposed to live. We already have this in place. So pretending like we need more restrictions is just not right. We already have what we need to verify voters, verify where they live, and make sure they only vote once. So making an issue of this only serves to whip up fear and make it seem as if we need more restrictions on our access to our right to vote.
Well, let's just say, I'm not sure if she's referencing me as making an issue of it, because I haven't, but I did answer the question. And if you're asking, well, I can test if Miranda were to beat me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a hard thing to imagine, but if she beats me, I guess she beats me.
Thank you.
So I guess this is my last question. Which I said last time. This is we live in Idaho Falls and we have the INEL out in the desert. This is obviously a big economic issue for Southeast Idaho that if either one of you should win, you'd represent. Do you support building nuclear power plants to supply our energy needs moving into the future? I think that goes to DR.
Not only do I support nuclear power, I support all of the clean power that Idaho offers. Hydropower, nuclear power. As the chair of the Energy Environment Technology Committee, I oversee and get to interact a lot with the INL. I'm incredibly supportive as a member of the Idaho Falls City Council. When we were exploring the new scale and the small modular reactors, I was very instrumental in helping us to ensure as best we could that would come here to the INL. I support all things. I think I get a minute on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry, forgive me. I'm off the schedule.
That's okay, we'll go
You got
30 seconds. Yeah, I was at 30, okay, let me just go with 30 from here. Good thing anyway. So yeah, nuclear power is incredibly important to me. See, having been born and raised here, you know, the site is everything. As a matter of fact, I just had a very interesting meeting earlier at the end of last week with our INL security, and it's fascinating the things that we are doing and the brink that we're on, and some of these major technologies right here can be game changing. And we need to support our nuclear power because if we go all green energy, that's all we're going to have, really.
Time.
Yeah,
For
so my dad still works at the site. Very, very exciting. One of my very favorite things to do growing up was go out and do family day at the site and visit EBR1. It's still one of my favorite things to do. I love EBR1, and I love the idea of our small modular reactors. I love the idea that we are taking a lead in our energy security, and I love the fact that the INL does important research on many things, including nuclear energy, cybersecurity, and many other things that are necessary to us in our area. I am 100% a supporter of the INL. It's been a big part of my life, and I want it to continue being a big part of Southeast Idaho.
Maybe that's one of those follow-up questions. We found something on which we could agree. Can we have just a quick applause on that?
No follow-up on you?
No, I do have a follow-up question, although you two both agreed on the director sales tax rebate, so.
Yeah, that's it.
As a follow-up, Congressman Mike Simpson, a Republican from Idaho, has proposed breaching 4 dams on the lower Snake River. So as we're asking an energy question, I'd ask each of you as a follow-up question whether you support Congressman Simpson's proposal to breach 4 dams on lower Snake River.
Starting with me, I 100% oppose that and have been working to oppose that. A couple years ago, I brought a resolution that was 100% supported in the legislature, basically affirming the necessity of our hydropower, what it does for Idaho and our surrounding area. If we were to breach those dams, we will cripple us, and particularly in the future. There's no amount of monopoly money that can create and give us enough for our future, especially given the financial situation of the dollar, by doing away with our hydro dams.
So the fun thing about technology and progress is that there are actually interesting new turbines that can be built in our rivers without harming the salmon, that would actually cost less to put in and build than maintaining the current dam system. So I actually agree with Representative Mike Simpson, about breaching those dams, because we have solutions that will cost us less in the long run, that will save us money, and will continue to help us maintain our amazing access to the salmon and the resources that it provides us in tourism.
You know, since we didn't do the follow-up, could we both do a 30-second follow-up to that follow-up?
Sure.
Could we do that?
Gosh,
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Since we, yeah. Okay, well, let me just say this, that's pie in the sky kind of wishful thinking. Right now, we have no idea the harmful effects if we were to breach those dams. The fish this year actually are doing better than they've done in years. We are at an all-time high. And so it's not, yes, we are. Yes, we are. Okay? I think we should add 5 more seconds on any interruption like that. So not only do we have that, we are looking at the import-export of goods and services, not just the power that comes from the dams. We need to keep what we have. The cost to destroy it will be enormous.
Time.
We have lots of solutions that we can use moving forward that don't have to deal with trying to spend the money to maintain outdated technology and dams. As we've seen with our schools and everything else and our infrastructure, if we don't continue to make investments in these things, they become more expensive over time. So the forward-thinking approach is to say, okay, what can we do to go ahead and make our hydropower more efficient and more friendly, while at the same time preserving our salmon and preserving the economic opportunities it brings to Idaho.
Time. So we are to closing statements?
Yes. Closing statements for a minute and a half, beginning of Ms. Ehardt.
You know, it has been my humble honor and privilege to serve in this capacity. I feel that I have had an opportunity to be impactful in the direction the state of Idaho has gone, in serving with my colleagues, in representing Idaho and representing you. When I look at what is happening nationally and the states and the cities that are struggling, I don't want that to happen here in Idaho. We have great people. This is where I was born and raised. I have every incentive to keep Idaho open and free and thriving. And we do that with our deregulation policies. We do that by being an inviting state, a state where people are fleeing their other states to come here. And we have to remember, why are they fleeing? They are fleeing the policies that have held them down. Some of these are policies such as Governor Gavin Newsom in California with lockdowns. These are Democrat policy, not Republican policies. Republican policies take a completely different approach, and those are the policies that I will continue to encourage and support. I believe in the traditional Idaho values. I believe in the Idaho way. We have a standard here that is unlike any other. And that standard is the kind where we pick ourselves up by the boots and we get done what we have to, and then we turn around and we help our neighbor. We do it. And I believe that after we've done all we can, it's then that we ask for help. People, I'd appreciate your support. If you have questions, please make sure you ask. Miranda, thank you. Can I say, Miranda, thank you for engaging in this.
All right, well, I would like to thank our moderators for helping us out tonight. I'd like to thank the Bonneville County Republican Central Committee for inviting us to do this bipartisan debate. And I would like to thank Representative Ehardt for showing up and engaging as well. And of course, I would like to thank you and the audience for showing up and engaging. As we know, it is important to be informed and engaged citizens. And so I'm very pleased to see such a good crowd here tonight and folks here who are ready to engage. So as you know, I believe that we should be investing in our communities. I believe that when we look at Idahoans' priorities, when we see the polling, when we see what matters to them, and when we talk to our neighbors, the things that we notice is that Idahoans want to invest in education. They want to make sure that their neighbors have access to affordable health care. They want to know that we will have good jobs in our community, because these are things that make us a healthy and safe community. These are things that help us in our pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. These are the things that we need in our communities. We have a need for this investment rather than saying that it's okay to go ahead and give tax breaks to the top 1% without investing in our communities. I am ready for us to stop waging a pointless and expensive culture war. I am ready for us to get back to the business of taking care of our people.
I'd like to thank our moderators as well. Thank you all for being here, and especially thank our candidates. Now is the time for
Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I know you won't forget to vote.